Welcome to our live Q&A session for Here Routing version 8. Since we got so many questions during our webinar last week, but only had limited time to answer them, we decided to follow up with a live Q&A. During today's session, our expert Marek Krysiuk from Here Technologies will answer all questions that we weren't able to address at the end of the webinar. Moreover, there will also be the opportunity to ask additional questions live and have a discussion with Marek. Therefore, I would also like to give a special thank you to Marek for making this session possible with his expertise on routing on such short notice. Big thanks also goes to Karina, our Global Here Technologies Partner Manager at MBI, who will support me with the moderation of this session, as well as a quick recap of routing version 7 versus version 8. So before we start, I would like to go over a few things regarding housekeeping. At the beginning, you will be muted to avoid background noise. To start off, we would like to discuss the open questions that came in at the end of the webinar last week. If you have any further questions, you can use the questions pane. In addition, you will be also able to raise your hand in the GoToWebinar system so that I can unmute you and you can ask your additional questions live. If there are extensive questions that we are not able to answer in this setup, we will get back to you via email. Last but not least, the recording of the webinar will be shared with you later on, and it will also be published online. So please keep that in mind when asking your questions and, for example, giving sensitive information about your operations. So that's it from my side. So I'll give over to Karina for a quick recap.
Thank you, Jessica, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Q&A session with Marek from Here Technologies. So we had a great webinar last week where he was introducing routing version 8, as Jessica said. So I hope you all have your cup of tea and coffee ready at hand, and we'll ask a lot of questions. So I quickly start with the recap, as Jessica said, of the version 7.8. And then I will ask a couple of questions from last webinar just to get into the groove. And as Jessica also said, we're not want to have things open and we don't want to leave them open. So we will follow up on questions which we're not able to answer today. So let's look at the routing version 8 and 7. So I actually want to highlight, which is not that much, I don't see the matrix routing. So that was actually the most impressive to me, which Marek introduced, because it got so much enhanced with the number of waypoints, with the time and speed the matrix is being calculated. Also, the track algorithm have been improved. The restriction and warning violations have been added and improved, which is very important because slope have some safety risk within. If it's the load, which can slip, right? If you're too fast, or if you underestimate the road conditions. So it's very important in any case. Also, when it comes to the U-turns, we all have seen trucks taking off the signs from the road because they couldn't do the U-turn. It still happens on a daily basis, and those signs are not cheap, I can tell you that much. So also when it comes to toll calculation, which is important if you do a pre-calculation of your costs, which are important in the transport and logistics case. And also the ETA improvement, which also relates to cost and has been improved a lot. So this is just quickly a recap of version 7 and 8. All of you who have attended the webinar, they are quite savvy with what has been presented by Marek. So let's jump to the questions quickly. So I got a question. Let's start with Hamid. Hamid was asking, in matrix routing, does the algorithm optimize the route for the user? For example, if the user has to visit 5 locations, he enters 5 locations and fixed only origin and destination. And the algorithm provides the optimized route in terms of distance or time. The algorithms tell from origin, he can go to location 3 first, then to location 4, then to location 2, and then a destination point. Marek, do you want to jump right in?
So, Yeah, I will jump right in. So thank you all for the question, and thank you, Karina and Jessica, for setting this up. So question itself, matrix routing is essential to execute those optimizations. This the one like described in the question, or many others, but matrix itself doesn't do those optimizations. It provides the raw data to compute the optimization on top of that. And the problem you describe is the technical term for this, and actually this is kind of pretty funny term, is the traveling salesman problem. And the traveling salesman problem is pretty standard problem, and there are a set of standard algorithms which can be applied to that off-the-shelf algorithms, but matrix itself doesn't do this optimization. As a part of a routing portfolio, we have waypoint sequencing optimization, and you can use this directly to optimize, to solve problems like this. So you are not using matrix, you are using waypoint sequence extension API, and a waypoint sequence extension API is using a matrix underneath. Matrix is the tool to solve this problem, but you need to have an additional step. Either use our API from waypoint extension, or use the other off-the-shelf algorithm for the optimization. Benefit of the waypoint sequencing algorithm is API is that actually you can not only optimize the sequence of points visited, but also you can define the preferred time window. So it will optimize with time window suggestions. So it's much more sophisticated optimization, but only a sequence of points.
Thank you, Marek. And don't forget, we have shared the documentation and also the demo application in the email for the follow-up for the webinar. So maybe you will find some helpful information there as well. So another question from Jens. He's asking, what about the different speed profiles for track routing?
This is a great question. There are we have different speed curves. It's actually, we used to have different speed curves for tracks in routing B7. However, looking at our testing and the raw data which we are getting from track probes, it seems that for the majority of our users, track profiles in ETA calculation for majority of tracks, they are not very useful. Tracks are, let's say, powerful enough to keep up with the traffic, and they are constrained by the traffic, like in the same way like regular cars. So the only difference is the maximum speed, which is limited either electronically through legal speed limits. What we are aiming at in routing V8, and it will be completed by the end of H1, is that our ETA will be using regular traffic with regular traffic and regular speed profiles with a speed capping, which would be set by legal regulations, or you can be overwritten by user. So you can actually set up your own speed limit if your track is speed limit constrained because of the load, or because of some specific regulations you need to comply with. The next step after that, it will be a significant simplification, but we are not ignoring the fact that actually there are special tracks with speed profiles which are really different, and for this we will have probe trained models in the future. So you can actually, if your fleet is very specific and really differs from the standard typical track behavior, then you will be able to share a probe with us, and we would be able to train ETA model to match your specific requirements.
All right, then we have another one from Serkan, which was not answered last week. He's asking how the 400 kilometer radius limit for matrix routing is calculated. is it direct distance between two farthest points in the data?
No, it's actually this is about 100 kilometers is the boundary of let's say our capability for those large matrices. It's defined in the best case scenario as a bounding box, so it's actually a little bit bigger than 400 in practice. But you can actually you don't have to worry about the defining this circle of this boundary, because with auto circle option will compute those boundaries for you. But in principle, it can be defined in the API if you would like to explicitly set this as a circle or as a bounding box. It's like actually, so in theory, the largest distance between 2 points, it will be like 400 times square root of 2 if you are in the corners of bounding box. But yeah, in principle, yeah, it's either size of a bounding box or circle, depending how you define your region.
All right, thank you, Marek. I got another question from Piotr. He's asking that they need a little help with truck routing. They say, we would like to plan the cheapest route for our clients based on kilometer cost, toll cost, and truck restrictions. I don't know which API would be the best and where to test it.
Actually, I would say that the currently routing API returns you travel time, which translates to the cost of a driver, and actually other costs which are time bound. We are returning toll costs, so information about the toll fees you have to pay along the route. And we are returning also the consumption, so how much fuel you need for the route. So you have over 3 components of to compute the cost of the route. My advice would be to use our alternatives, compute alternative routes option to compute several routes, to get several routes with those parameters, and select the right balance of cost, time versus toll versus fuel used, and CO2 carbon footprint which you generate with the route. And based on your preferences, your requirements, your objectives, you can select the most optimal route. This option gives you the most flexibility. We are just laying out all the options in front of you.
All right. So I got 3 more questions, which are kind of related to each other. So maybe I ask them in a row, and then you can answer them. So the first is, do you have future plan to add public transport to mode to matrix routing? The second is, what is the update period and coverage of public transportation routing option, especially in Turkey? And the third one is routing API. Can I give the sequence of waypoints to receive actual distance based time in the response? So it's coming from Serkan and Hilmi from Turkey. So first,
okay.
let's do the public transport mode to matrix routing.
So answer is very easy. It's in short, it's no. We are not planning to add the public transit. Actually, public transit API is from, let's say, a technical perspective, from the endpoint perspective, is a separate API, separate. You need to use the separate endpoint, and we are treating this kind of as a sub-service. It's not a part of a core routing API, because it operates on different map, because when you think about when you look at the routing, routing is executed on roads, and public transit is executed also on roads and rails and so on. But actually, at the end, those points, connection points, are discrete. You have a less flexibility. So the logic on and the way how we are executing public transit is completely different. We have a discrete points like stations, and those points we are connecting those points into the public transit network, which is distinct from the road network. So this is technically slightly different, and for that reason, we are not offering this as a part of a Matrix API. Second reason why we don't have this is that we struggle to find the strong use case for this because matrix routing, as previously explained, is for optimization, for logistic optimization. So if you have multiple deliveries, or you have multiple people to deliver multiple people which must be driven to different destinations, or you have fleet of taxis and you need to connect this with different people. In case of public transit, is more consumer oriented, so you would like to discover to find the fastest way from A to B with a public transit, get the departures and so on. So we don't see so far a use case for public transit matrix. If you have something, when we open the mic, we can discuss this. But at this point, there is no plan for matrix public transit.
So, and I will check for the Turkey coverage for public transit, Marek, and you can then straight go ahead to the next question, which was routing API. Can I give the sequence of waypoints to receive actual distance base time in the response?
So I'm not sure I understand the question. If you can get the distances, yes, between the points. The sequence, maybe it's related to the previous question. So if you would like to get the distance for the sequence of visits between the points, again, this is the waypoint extension API built on top of Matrix API.
Yeah.
If there is actually question was different, we can actually go back to them later on.
Yeah, and not to forget, there are actually 200 waypoints which can be included in a request, right, for routing? Am I
yes,
correct?
Of course, but actually, yes, this is correct. The thing is that if we are not talking about matrix, but if we are talking about points, then oh yes, sorry, then actually my mistake. Yes,
right.
it's actually I'm thinking so much about matrix in recent days that can be confusing.
Yeah.
Can be confusing.
Well,
Anyway,
it's a big tool. Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, if you provide a sequence of waypoints, we'll compute the route along those sequence of waypoints, and we'll return the distance and all other parameters, travel time, everything which you are getting in the normal routing. So all those return parameters we discussed we discussed in the previous call in the presentation will be available also for the waypoint sequence. We are treating this as a normal route, but with addition of the waypoints.
Awesome. So this was it from my side. Thanks a lot. I give back to Jessica and Marek for you guys to join the conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Karina. So we already got some new questions in the question pane here in the system right now. So I will start with them. So the first one is optimizing the waypoints. Is it possible to group the waypoints? If I have 10 waypoints and 3 of them should be visited in successive order, is it possible to manage this?
So if we are talking about regular routing, then the sequence of visits is defined by the order of points in the request. If we are talking about the optimization of points visits, then actually you need to the best solution to this is to execute two separate queries. Where you have those 3 points as a first points in the sequence. So we will optimize route for those 3 points and then do this for the rest. So like 2 separate requests and combine them calculate a route between the latest point from the first sequence with the rest of the points. So it's feasible, not with a 1 request, but within 2 requests.
Great, thank you. So the next question is, how does the algorithm calculate the cost if I have multiple types of cost? cost per kilometer, cost per time, and cost per utilization carriers. Is it possible to use a cost per extra time if the driver has to do overtime?
We are not computing the cost directly in routing API. Maybe you are referring to fleet telematics, but in routing API, we compute those costs and present those costs to you. And by cost, we understand the time, toll costs, and fuel consumption. And then user needs to translate this to the monetary costs of user time. Then actually, with the information about the travel time, you can apply different rates depending on the duration of a trip. But we are not return driver cost as a monetary value. It's returned only as a time, which needs to then be post-processed.
Okay, thank you. So the next question, how to calculate possible cheapest route for trucks based on kilometer cost and toll cost?
Optimal route, if I understood correctly. So again, sorry, could you please repeat, because it's actually something is breaking.
Okay, so how to calculate possible cheapest route for trucks based on kilometer cost and toll cost?
Okay, so the way to do this with the current API is to compute alternatives, look at the costs for each alternative, and select the one which is cheapest. Okay,
great. So do you have pickup van type for the matrix routing, or can we convert car type to pickup van by adjusting some other parameters?
So it's actually you can use the car mode for vans, because if they are under 3.5 tons, the regulations are the same like cars. If the question is if you can use the car mode with dimensional parameters with the physical constraints, this is not available yet. It will be supported in H2 2022.
Okay, great, thank you. So the next question we have is, do you have parallel transaction limit, request per second, for the matrix routing API?
Yes, we do, and it's very it's transactional, and it's 3,000 transactions per second. But keep in mind that the transactions are counted based on the number of elements in matrix.
Okay, thank you. So we have one last question for right now. So if you have any additional questions, please use the opportunity now and put them in the question pane, or you can also raise your hand if you want to talk to Marek directly. So for right now, the last question is there any limit for the service that can normalize the current location data?
Not sure I understand the question. Normalize, what do you mean by normalization of the location data? Whoever asked, maybe you can open the mic and elaborate on this question.
Yes, so this question came from Serkan. So Serkan, if you would be open to talk directly to Marek right now, please raise your hand so I can unmute you. Oh, okay. So he wrote in the question pane, converting the current location data to standard routing shape.
Okay. So like GPS data, yes, you can actually do this in several ways. Actually, there are 3 ways of, if you have a set of coordinates or data from the GPS data from whatever source, you can do this through either using waypoints, if you have up to 200 waypoints, and then create a route based on that. You can use the route import function, which is about to be released in upcoming weeks. So I think it's already in documentation labeled as a beta. So it's already, you can see specification in the documentation. Or if not, you will see this in the next 2-3 weeks. So route import the only difference with route import is that those points are not treated as explicit waypoints, and there are no limits of 200 points. So if you have 1,000, 10,000 points, you can use them to import to recreate the route from them. But the best and the oldest way of doing this is Route Magic Extension API, which has multiple other options to normalize the points to road network and recreate a route from that, plus retrieving all of the rich data from HERMA content.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Marek. So there are no additional questions right now.
I have one for you, Marek.
Hopefully not difficult one.
I only ask difficult questions. No, so we heard a few things of what's coming soon. So maybe you can elaborate a bit and talk about features. Also, if it's a recap, what we can expect the upcoming quarters on improvements of the routing version 8.
Okay, yeah, it's a difficult one. I knew it.
Okay, I know you will manage.
Actually, the thing is, we are working in parallel on all the topics we discussed last time. So it's nothing is perfect, and this actually perfection is the goal, which probably never will be achieved. So we are having incremental improvements across all the modes and all the functionalities I described last time. So this is every mode, every sub API has dedicated team which maintains and extends this. However, there are certain areas where we will be focused in particular in upcoming months and next year. So first one is electrification and electric and a transition to the electric fleet. So now we are with the cars, we are looking more towards urban deliveries with electric vehicles, and maybe also maybe it's not the next year, because also for industry is the new thing, but also looking into electric trucks, mid and long haul. So electrification will be a big topic. Second thing is second topic is profile ETAs. So we made a lot of improvements with ETAs. However, our research team was working last year on topics related to use advanced machine learning techniques in ETA optimization. And we would like to make those transition this research into production, into features which are available to users. So you can expect additional improvements in ETA quality. Third thing is related to the sustainability. So you currently already can compute the consumption and fuel utilization for different routes. However, there are more aspects to the environmental footprint of transportation and routes. So we would like to enrich routing response with information about the environmental footprint of a route taken. So CO2, then actually there are multiple improvements in truck. So actually transportation and logistics and truck is one of the most important topics we have. So without going into anything in particular, we have a dedicated team which continuously analyzes input from the market, input from our customers, and we are responding to the input and making improvements. So for example, the last topic we we are working on is improvements in difficult terms. So we have already this feature, but there are certain corner cases which are not were not addressed properly. So we are ironing those features. In Matrix is actually topics activities in Matrix will focus mostly on will be related to the travel time, so ETA I mentioned. Matrix is slightly different problem and has different scale of issues compared to the regular routing due to the fact of the scale and number of routes we need to execute in very short time. So translation of those improvements from research, from machine learning improvements of research, it will be completely different task in Matrix. So this would be something which we will be trying to, which will be focusing to improve in Matrix. And finally, this 400 kilometers limit. So those large matrices were reserved to urban areas. However, we are recognizing that there are certain customers who would like to have best of the both worlds. So small matrices are without limits. Those limits are imposed only on the large matrix. So we are trying to improve the ways to find something in the middle. But we will have a time-aware large matrices without a distance limit. But this is still more of a research project. Rather than a 2022 commitment.
Okay, so we also have one more question from the audience. If
I just one shout out from me. So Marek was talking about enhancements. So we are sending out the here release notes on a monthly basis. So don't miss them because we always report if there have been improvements made to the API. So you should read them and see if you're affected, if your routing version is affected. It's very important. So if you're not part of the monthly newsletter we're sending out, our partner newsletter, just go to our website and subscribe for it. Or go to the Here website where you find on the developer.here.com release notes, and for every month, every service will be listed and every change will be outlined. So please do that because it's very important to stay on the latest versions.
Okay, perfect. So last question from the audience right now. If I identify any road restriction which the here map doesn't have, is it possible to manually modify the map?
So you can report the change to the map creator. We have a map creator service, and as a registered user, if after registering you can report this issue and it will be picked up. If you would like to act upon the change immediately, so you would like to make sure that this change is taken, constraint is taken into account in your routing request, you can use the avoid options in routing. So you can mark this link as a link to avoid, and then in subsequent route calculations, we will take this avoidance into account.
All right, I just copied a link into the box so that everyone can see that. I have one more question for you, Marek. We've been talking about version 7 and version 8 and looking at the differences. So how about partners are not being ready, fully migrate to version 8? Is there a possibility of mixing or modularity use of version 7 and 8? Or do they need to migrate to version 8 fully?
No, you can actually use the two versions at the same time. And actually, this is actually, honestly speaking, Karina, it's would be very smart move to actually migrate gradually. So you won't have this migration shock, and you can actually, yeah, if there are some issues, you can spot this earlier and yeah, get in touch with our tech support to clarify them. So now you can use both services at the same time. Of course, API is different, so it's you cannot just easily switch between both of them. However, we are providing migration guide which explains each attribute and from V7 and how it translates to corresponding attribute in the routing V8, both for request and response. And also a very good tool which helps with migration is this our demo client, our reference client, because it can be, you can look at this tool also as a request builder. So if you click through the UI at the end, on the bottom of the tool, you will see the constructed request. So it's actually, you can easily build and see how the V8 request look and how it compares with V7 request.
And also a remark from my side, we receive often questions that customers and partners cannot access those new services. So if you have been a partner with here for a long time and using the services for several years, you might still have an app code and or app token, app ID and app code. So this is actually quite outdated, and here has released 2 new authentication types already 2 years ago. So we kindly ask you to check out your application and get in touch with us if you're not having the right authentication codes in place. Without those, you cannot access any of the new versions. So just make sure you are set and shoot us an email.
And just one last comment about those versions. When Karina, you asked me about the new things, so the list of small improvements is much longer than what you saw. So we are continuously improving quality of the service, but we are doing this only for routing V8. So I strongly encourage you to start migration process as soon as possible, because you will get much better service than old routing V7, even if it's not visible directly in the API structure and options. Underlying engine is undergoing constant changes.
All right. Jessica, anything from our audience?
No additional questions. So I think at this point we can close our discussion.
Good. Ready for the second breakfast?
First breakfast.
All right. Well,
So,
from my side, thanks everyone.
Thank you everybody for joining today. We hope that we were able to give you some more insights. Oh, just one moment. I see that we have one more question. Let me check. Oh, no question, just people saying thanks again and well done. So thank you very much for your feedback. We hope you enjoyed the session and we could answer your specific questions. And thank you also for Marek and Karina to taking the time, and for you all for taking the time to attend today. So yeah, just one last thing, we would really appreciate it if you would answer our feedback survey right after this session, or also in the follow-up email. And yeah, you will get a follow-up email with the recording of the session. Yeah, and that's it from my side. So thank you in advance and have a great rest of the day. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.